Bullies ripped his traditional African shirt. What happened next went viral. Chapter 1. The pride of heritage Malik Okoro stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of his vibrant dashiki. It was bold, with shades of deep crimson, gold and forest green flowing in swirling patterns that looked like they had been painted by hand. The fabric glowed softly in the morning light, and the stitching along the seams showed the care and love that went into its making. He touched the fabric with reverence. Mom really outdid herself this time, he whispered to himself. From the kitchen, his mother called out, "Malik, hurry up, sweetie. Your dad wants to take a family picture before you leave." "I'm coming," he called back. 16 years old and a junior at Whitmore High, Malik was tall for his age, with deep brown skin and thoughtful eyes that carried the weight of both curiosity and caution. Born in Maryland to Nigerian immigrants, he had always straddled two worlds, the vibrant cultural heritage of his family and the often cold, indifferent world of American suburbia. Malik's father, Dr. Okoro, was a professor of African history at a nearby university. He filled the house with books, stories of powerful kingdoms like Mali and Benin, and tales of ancestors who resisted colonizers with courage and spirit. Malik's mother, Ngozi, was an artisan who designed traditional African garments and sold them both locally and online. Her hands, always in motion, had stitched heritage into cloth. In this household, culture wasn't a costume. It was lived, breathed, and cherished. That week, Whitmore High was celebrating Cultural Diversity Week, an annual event the school held with good intentions but often shallow execution. The flyers boasted slogans like "Taste the World" and "Wear Your Culture," as if traditions could be summed up in potluck dishes and themed dress-up days. But to Malik, this week meant something real. Something sacred. He had asked his mother 2 months ago to sew him something special for this occasion, and she had, pouring hours into the dashiki he now wore, each stitch a silent message of love, pride, and defiance. His father stood by the front door, holding a phone in one hand and wearing a smile that stretched from memory to hope. "Let me see you, Malik," he said. Malik stepped into the living room, and his father's smile deepened. His mother turned from the stove, eyes shining. "You look like your grandfather," she said, voice trembling slightly. "He would have been proud," Malik nodded. "Thanks, Mom." They gathered outside, the morning light casting a soft glow across the porch. The photo they took captured more than just fabric and faces, it captured pride. Before he left, his mother placed a hand on his shoulder and looked into his eyes. "You don't just wear your culture," she said, "you carry it." The walk to school was uneventful. Birds chirped. The breeze was warm for spring. Malik held his head high, his backpack bouncing softly against his back. As he approached the school building, he could already see students milling about in the courtyard. Some wore jerseys from other countries. A few had ethnic scarves or shirts, and some, predictably, wore nothing out of the ordinary. He stepped through the gates and felt the shift immediately. Eyes turned. Some stared. Others smirked. Two boys leaning against the lockers nudged each other and whispered. A girl walking past him raised an eyebrow. Somewhere behind him, a soft chuckle floated through the air. "Here we go," Malik thought. "Hey, looking real royal today, King T'Challa," someone called out. A few kids laughed. Malik turned, offering a tight-lipped smile. "Thanks," he said, calm and collected. But the laughter wasn't kind. It wasn't camaraderie. It was mockery. Dressed up as jokes, he made his way through the hallways like a silent soldier, head high. He noticed the way conversations paused when he walked by. The exaggerated stares. One student took out their phone and snapped a photo and they thought he wasn't looking. "Maybe it's in my head," he tried to tell himself. But deep down, He knew at WASN single quotes T. He reached his first-class world literature and slipped into his seat just as the bell rang. His teacher, Mr. Reynolds, nodded at him briefly, then began his lecture about post-colonial narratives. The irony wasn't lost on Malik. Behind him, he could hear a few classmates whispering. He caught the word costume and tribal, followed by a snort. It stung, but he didn't flinch. At lunch, Malik sat alone under a tree at the far edge of the schoolyard. He had brought his mother's jollof rice packed with plantains and grilled chicken, his favorite. The smells comforted him, grounding him like a drumbeat in the storm. "Yo, is that curry or something?" A voice called from nearby. He looked up to see a group of 4 boys football players watching him. One of them, a tall blonde with a smug grin, leaned in. "You cook that in a volcano?" he said, mimicking an explosion with his hands. The others laughed. Malik said nothing. He packed his container and stood up. As he turned to leave, he heard them behind him. "Where you going, Wakanda? Don't forget your lion skin." The words followed him like flies. That night at dinner, he didn't say much. His mother noticed immediately. "Something happen?" she asked. Malik shook his head. "Just tired." His father looked at him for a long time before nodding. "Remember, son, not everyone will understand, but that's not your burden to carry." Malik smiled faintly. "I know." The next day, he wore the dashiki again, and the whispers got louder. He wasn't looking for attention. He was looking for dignity. But in that school, dignity was often mistaken for defiance, and defiance didn't go unnoticed. Chapter 2. The shirt they couldn't stand. By the third day of Cultural Diversity Week, Malik Okoro's dashiki was no longer just a piece of clothing. It had become a target. The whispers hadn't died down, they'd multiplied. The glances turned sharper. The mockery grew more confident. Some of the stares now carried something heavier than ridicule. Resentment. Malik sat at the edge of the hallway before the first bell, scrolling aimlessly through his phone, trying to pretend he didn't hear them. "Here comes the Lion King." "Again," someone said behind him. "Wakanda forever." Another voice called sarcastically, raising a fake salute and mimicking a tribal chant. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He knew the voices. They belonged to the same people who laughed when a student from India brought samosas last year, and the same group who used chopsticks to poke at Asian kids' lunches before TikTok taught them it was trendy. He had grown used to the hypocrisy. How culture was praised when it was exotic, packaged, or made into a Halloween costume, but ridiculed when someone lived it with pride. Still, Malik refused to back down. He wore his dashiki again, stitched now with the faintest thread of defiance. Lunch period was when it escalated. Malik sat at the far corner of the cafeteria, eating his food with his earbuds in, hoping to drown out the noise. He could feel them before he saw them, the group of boys who'd been circling him like vultures the past few days. At the center of them was Chase Whitman, son of a wealthy developer, quarterback of the football team and walking personification of entitlement. He didn't need to be the loudest because people listened to him by default. His voice carried weight not because it was wise, but because his last name bought silence. Chase dropped into the seat across from Malik without asking. His friends flanked him on both sides. "Nice outfit, Malik," he said, his smile too wide to be friendly. "You trying to be a tribal leader or something?" Malik paused his music, looked up calmly. Double quotes, "No, just representing where I come from." Chase raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? Well, where you come from looks like a circus. No offense." His friends chuckled. Malik didn't flinch. Chase leaned in. "You know what I think? I think you wear that thing to get attention. You want everyone to look at you and clap like, wow, how brave, how proud of his roots. But you look ridiculous, man." Malik looked him dead in the eye. "And yet here you are, sitting at my table, talking about my shirt. The table fell quiet for half a second. A few students nearby turned to look. Chase's grin faltered. One of his goons broke the silence with a forced laugh. Okay, Wakanda boys got some fire. Chase stood up slowly, brushing invisible dust from his pristine varsity jacket. Careful, bro. You might forget where you are. Malik met his stare. I haven't. Chase gave a tight smile and walked away. But his eyes said, this isn't over. Send single quotes to later that afternoon. During physical education, the sun beat down on the asphalt as students gathered on the outdoor courts. It was dodgeball day, chaotic, loud, and competitive. Malik kept to himself, stretching on the sidelines while waiting for his group to be called. His dashiki had become part of his identity that week. He wore it like armor, though it was now starting to feel like a bullseye. As students mingled, throwing balls and joking around, Chase and his crew waited for their moment. They caught him. Alone, behind the gymnasium near the fencing that separated the court from the parking lot. Malik didn't see them coming until it was too late. Hey, African Prince, Chase sneered, stepping in front of him. Before Malik could respond, two of the other boys circled behind and boxed him in. What do you want? Malik asked, already knowing the answer. We just wanted a closer look at that costume of yours, Chase said. It's not really regulation gym attire, is it? I'll change after class, Malik said flatly, trying to step aside. But they blocked his path. You think you're better than us, huh? One of them said, walking around like a damn peacock. Chase stepped closer. You want to wear your culture so bad? Let's see what's underneath it. Then, without warning, Chase grabbed the front of Malik's dashiki and pulled. The seams tore. The sound echoed louder than Malik thought possible. Malik stumbled backward, slamming into the chain-link fence as Chase yanked again, ripping the cloth at the shoulder. Another boy grabbed the hem and tore upward, laughing. Students nearby turned to look, some watched silently, some laughed. A few started filming, but one girl, quiet, observant, and always holding her phone like a camera, had already been recording the whole thing. Her name was Lynn Trandat. She stood just 20 feet away, her face expressionless, phone steady in hand, capturing every second. Malik didn't fight back. His fists clenched, not in anger, but in restraint. He knew how this would be spun if he swung. Instead, he pulled away, clutching what was left of the dashiki to his chest. The fabric hung in tatters, bright colors stained by dust, torn threads dancing in the wind. Now you fit in, Chase? Muttered, brushing his hands off like he'd just taken out the trash. Laughter erupted behind him. Malik's chest rose and fell. His eyes burned, but he said nothing. He turned, shoulders squared, and walked away, slow, steady steps through the crowd of whispering students and laughing bullies. He didn't go to the nurse's office. He didn't go to the principal. He walked straight home. No one stopped him. That night, Malik sat on his bed, holding the torn dashiki in his lap. His fingers ran over the ripped threads as if trying to sew the pieces together with memory. His mother knocked gently before entering. When she saw the shirt, her hand flew to her mouth. They tore it, he said quietly. Right off me. Her eyes welled with tears, but she held them back. His father came in behind her. He said nothing, just sat beside Malik and put a hand on his back. They wanted to humiliate me, Malik whispered. Like I was nothing. Like I shouldn't be proud. You were brave, his father said. Bravery doesn't always
roar. Sometimes it just walks away. Malik didn't speak.
He just nodded, holding the cloth like it was still whole. That night, Lin Tran uploaded the video. No hashtags, no edits, no commentary. Just a raw 47-second clip, titled, They Ripped His Culture Off His Back. Chapter 3. Viral justice. The night was quiet in the Okoro household, but the world outside was anything but. While Malik lay curled on his side, drifting in and out of sleep, his torn dashiki folded gently on the chair by his desk, something was stirring on the internet. A truth too powerful to remain buried was beginning to rise, and it started with a single post. Lin Tran, a quiet observer and talented photographer for the school yearbook, didn't usually get involved. She saw everything but rarely said anything. But that afternoon, standing behind the metal fence of the gym courtyard, her hands had trembled as she filmed. Her voice never spoke, but her heart screamed. And as she lay in bed, replaying the footage over and over, something inside her snapped. Enough was enough. With a deep breath, she opened TikTok, uploaded the video, and typed a short caption. "This is not okay. Hashtag stop racism, hashtag respect culture." She didn't expect much. She didn't expect that in less than 5 hours, it would surpass 100,000 views. By midnight, it hit 2 million. And by morning, the internet was on fire. The video was raw. Malik, standing alone. The confrontation. The words, Lion King, costume, Wakanda. The grabbing. The sound of the dashiki tearing. The laughter. The last frame was of Malik walking away, torn cloth in his hands. The schoolyard behind him echoing with ridicule. No music. No edits. No filters. Just truth. And that truth hit a nerve. By noon the next day, it had over 10 million views across platforms. Twitter exploded. Instagram Reels, reposts, reaction videos, and duets poured in. TikTok creators with millions of followers broke down the symbolism. Activists, historians, and fashion designers stitched the video with commentary. One post read, "They didn't just rip a shirt. They tried to rip identity, and they failed." Hashtag Dashiki for Malik, another said. "Our ancestors were stripped of culture. And now, when we try to reclaim it, this is how we're treated? Never again." Celebrities began weighing in. Viola Davis tweeted, "A boy wore his roots. They tried to tear it off. But his roots are deeper than they know." Hashtag respect culture, hashtag Dashiki for Malik. John Boyega, actor and outspoken activist, reposted the video with, "This is a battle for dignity. Stay strong, Malik. Your pride shook the world." Influencers across the African diaspora began wearing dashikis. In solidarity, posting photos with the caption, "For Malik, for culture, for justice." The school, meanwhile, panicked. Whitmore High School's administration hadn't anticipated the backlash. Within hours, their email inbox was flooded. Angry parents, civil rights lawyers, journalists, community leaders. Even the local mayor's office demanded a response. By 10 a.m., the principal issued a statement via the school's social media accounts. "We are aware of a recent incident involving students during Cultural Diversity Week. It was an unfortunate misunderstanding that does not reflect the values of Whitmore High." The comments section exploded. Unfortunate misunderstanding? That was a hate crime. Where's the apology to Malik? This statement is a disgrace. Protect your students. All of them. The principal removed the post within the hour. But the internet never forgets. Screenshots were everywhere. Petitions began circulating, calling for disciplinary action against the bullies, cultural sensitivity training, and a public apology. One petition had over 250,000 signatures by nightfall. The heart of it all, Malik sat quietly in his room. He wasn't online. He wasn't glued to the numbers. He didn't know that his name had become a trending topic worldwide. He just sat in silence, staring at the folded desk key, wondering how something so beautiful could be treated like garbage, until his mother entered, phone in hand. "Malik," she said softly, her voice both trembling and proud. "You might want to see this." She handed him the phone. The first thing he saw was a photo of two students in another state wearing dashikis, holding a sign that read, "We wear this for Malik." He scrolled. A football team from Atlanta posing in dashikis on the field. A high school in Brooklyn posting a photo of over 200 students in African prints with the caption, #Dashiki for Malik, unity over hate. His fingers trembled. The tears he hadn't allowed himself to cry before now came freely. He wasn't alone. That evening, major news networks began calling CNN, The Guardian, BBC Africa. Even Al Jazeera reached out through emails and direct messages. Ngozi. His mother, read aloud one of the messages from a BBC journalist. "We'd love to feature Malik's story as part of a special report on cultural identity and education. Please let us know if your family would be open to an interview." Another read, "We believe this story can spark meaningful dialogue across schools globally." Malik didn't know what to say. He wasn't looking for attention. But somehow, attention had found him. And now it was demanding something more. Meanwhile, back at school, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The principal scheduled a closed door meeting with Malik and his parents. They offered him counseling, an extended absence, and vague promises of internal reviews. But outside those walls, a movement. With swelling. Students began showing up in dashikis, dozens on day one, hundreds by the end of the week. Many weren't African. Some didn't even understand the culture fully. But they knew injustice when they saw it. Every photo was posted, tagged, and shared with the same caption, #Dashiki for Malik. Murals appeared in city streets, portraits of Malik with lines like, "You can't tear what's sown in the soul." Across the country, teachers began using the incident as a teaching moment. In Philadelphia, a history teacher gave an entire lesson on the origin and meaning of dashikis and West African textiles. In Seattle, a sociology class debated cultural expression and institutional racism. Malik's story had left the schoolyard. It entered the conversation. But amid all this noise, Malik remained quiet. One night, he stood at the edge of the porch, staring out into the quiet street. His mother joined him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You were never meant to be invisible," she said. He looked at her. "I didn't want to be seen like this." "I know," she said, "but sometimes the world needs a mirror." "And you became one." He nodded slowly, and in that moment, something changed, not just around him, but within him. He didn't feel like a victim. He felt like a spark. Chapter 4. From pain to power. The studio lights were blinding. The set was quiet, but the silence buzzed with anticipation. Dozens of crew members stood just off camera. A producer whispered into a headset. A makeup artist dabbed at Malik's forehead gently with a sponge. It felt surreal that he, a quiet junior from Whitmore High School, was now sitting on the stage of one of the most watched talk shows in the country. He looked down at his lap. There, carefully folded across his legs, was his mother's second dashiki. This one, a deep royal blue threaded with golden spirals, shimmered beneath the studio lights. It wasn't the one they'd ripped. It was the one she made after. The one she said was for his next beginning. The host, a poised woman in a crimson suit with tight curls and eyes sharp as her mind, leaned forward and offered Malik a warm, steady smile. "We're honored to have you here today, Malik," she said, her voice calm but carrying. "Thank you for your courage." Malik nodded politely. "Thank you for having me." She glanced briefly at the audience, who were holding their breath, then back at him. "Before we talk about everything that's happened since the video, I want to take you back to the moment that started it all. What were you thinking when they tore your shirt?" Malik paused. The silence wasn't awkward, it was sacred. Then, softly, he said, "I was thinking, they can rip what I wear, but they can't rip who I am." They tore my shirt, but they didn't tear my roots. There was a hush. The kind of hush that hangs in the air right before thunder. Then dash applause. Not the polite kind. Not the audience clap on cue kind. This was thunder. The host blinked, visibly moved. She reached out and gently squeezed his hand. Malik. She said, "You've just said what so many of us have been trying to find the words for our whole lives." After the interview, the studio aired a special montage. Clips from people all over the country and world, sending their love, solidarity, and stories. A woman in Mississippi who was mocked for wearing a hijab in college. A boy from the Dominican Republic whose classmates laughed when he spoke Spanish to his abuela on the phone. An adopted Korean girl who was teased for her lunch every day until she stopped bringing it. Each of them looked into the camera and said, in their own voice, "They didn't tear my roots." By the following week, Malik's name wasn't just trending, it had entered the national conversation on representation, racism, and pride. He became a symbol. Not because he wanted to, but because he stood for something people were desperate to see in the world again. Dignity under pressure. At home, Malik tried to keep life normal. He still took out the trash, still helped his mother fold laundry, still studied for his chemistry midterm. But the world around him didn't slow down. One afternoon, a black SUV pulled into their driveway and a woman in a sleek blazer stepped out with a letter and a folder in hand. She introduced herself as a representative of a national nonprofit called CultureWorks, an organization dedicated to uplifting minority youth and preserving cultural identities through education. "We've followed your story closely," she said. "You stood tall when the world tried to make you shrink. We'd like to offer you something." Malik's eyes widened as she handed him the folder. Inside, a full-ride scholarship to any university of his choice, as long as he maintained a GPA above 3.0. His mother cried. His father shook the woman's hand with both hands, eyes brimming with gratitude. Malik just stood there, stunned, holding something he never expected, an open door he hadn't even knocked on. But that wasn't the last surprise. The next day, a large package arrived at the front door. It was wrapped in black silk, tied with golden thread. No return address. Just a note tucked into the folds. It read, "To the young man who stood taller than any villain. May your spirit remain unshaken, your roots remain deep, and your story remain yours. A fellow son of Nigeria." Inside was a handcrafted dashiki, custom designed with intricate embroidery lined with fine gold threads. It shimmered with elegance and defiance. On the inside hem was a simple phrase stitched in metallic thread, "Stand tall." The sender? None other than Chiwetel Ejiofor, the award-winning Hollywood actor of Nigerian descent. The letter went viral within hours of being posted online. Meanwhile, at Whitmore High, the tone had changed entirely. The administration, once silent and hesitant, now faced overwhelming pressure, following weeks of petitions, calls, and media coverage. The school board held an emergency meeting and announced formal disciplinary actions. Chase Whitman and his 3 accomplices were officially suspended indefinitely. But the punishment didn't stop there. They were also required to complete a 40-hour course in cultural sensitivity and racial awareness of public apology, both written and in-person participation in a new school-wide committee on inclusivity chaired by faculty and student representatives, though many argued the consequences were still too light. The message was clear. The age of silence was over. Chase's parents tried to silence the outrage with lawyers and reputation management firms, but it was too late. He became a case study not just in privilege, but in what happens when the world changes faster than your prejudice. Students no longer looked up to him. Teachers no longer offered second chances behind closed doors. The once untouchable was now held Accountable. Malik, however, wasn't interested in revenge. When asked by a reporter if he hated Chase, he replied, "I don't hate him. I feel sorry for him, because anyone who tears down someone else's culture has no idea who they are themselves." More opportunities followed. An invitation to speak at a youth leadership summit in Washington, D.C., an op-ed published in Teen Vogue titled "Clothes Weren't Just Cloth, They Were My History," and a phone call from a publishing house wanting to turn his journey into a children's book. But Malik remained grounded. He still spent evenings playing chess with his dad, still helped his mom select fabrics for her next collection, still got nervous before math quizzes. His life had changed, but his roots had not. One afternoon, Malik visited the school library, the same place he used to hide during lunch periods. When the bullying was at its worst. Now, something new hung by the entrance. A framed photo of Malik wearing his dashiki, the torn one, sewn back together by his mother's careful hands, next to a plaque that read, "They tore the fabric, but not the spirit. Let this be a place of pride, not prejudice." Chapter 5. The World War Dashiki. It started as a post. A high school student in Atlanta posted a photo wearing a vivid dashiki with a caption that read, "Let's make this more than a moment. Let's make it a movement. Hashtag Dashiki Day, this Friday." For Malik, for us all. The idea spread like wildfire. By noon, students across the U.S. were reposting it. By nightfall, creators in South Africa, the UK, and Brazil were organizing their own. By the end of the week, it had become a global call to action. Dashiki Day was born. The premise was simple. On the last Friday of the month, people from every background were invited to wear traditional African clothing, dashikis, jellies, kente scarves as a visual stand against racism, cultural erasure, and hate. Not as fashion, but as a statement of solidarity. It was no longer just about Malik. It was about reclaiming identity. It was about honoring heritage, and it was about unity. On that first Dashiki Day, the world turned vibrant. In Nairobi, a parade of school children danced through the streets in colorful prints, chanting songs of pride. In London, buses and subways were filled with commuters wearing dashikis beneath overcoats. In Sao Paulo, artists painted murals of African kings and queens with the words, "Roots run deep." In New York, over 1,000 students marched across the Brooklyn Bridge wearing dashikis and holding signs that read, "You can't cancel culture. We are the culture." Everywhere, across continents and time zones, a single name kept echoing: Malik. Okoro. It wasn't long before international organizations took notice. The UN Youth Assembly extended a formal invitation for Malik to speak at their global summit on diversity and education. For a while, he didn't know if he could say yes. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't an activist. He was just a kid who wore his mom's work to school. But his mom looked at him the night he got the letter and said, "When your voice carries truth, you don't need titles." So he went. Standing on the marble floor of the United Nations chamber, beneath the flags of 193 countries, Malik wore a new dashiki one designed by his mother, with symbols stitched into the sleeves representing unity, growth, and resilience. He stood before delegates and youth leaders from all over the globe and spoke with calm fire. "I didn't come here to tell you a sob story. I came here to tell you what I learned. They tore my shirt, but they didn't tear my roots. Because roots don't grow from fabric. They grow from pride, from love, and from the stories we carried out. Our cultures don't divide us. Our ignorance does. And it's time we stop confusing the two." There was a silence in the room that hummed with awe, and then a standing ovation. Weeks later, Malik was nominated for a National Student Leadership Award. The ceremony took place in Washington, D.C., in a grand hall with chandeliers that sparkled like stars. Students from every state stood in polished suits and gowns, but Malik walked proudly down the center aisle in yet another dashiki, this one midnight black with gold sunbursts across the chest. When his name was announced, the entire room rose. In applause, he didn't give a long speech. He just said, "I thought they had taken something from me, but they gave me something instead, a reason to speak." And yet, for all the awards, headlines, and international praise, the moment that meant the most to Malik came much later. It happened in a place where the pain had begun. Back at Whitmore High School. The school had changed. New murals decorated the hallways. Cultural awareness courses were now required for all students. The student council had its first diversity council, and Malik's name was etched into the school's civic honor wall. But Malik didn't come back for honors. He came back to talk. The auditorium was packed. Some came out of curiosity, some out of guilt, others out of genuine respect. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He told his story again, but this time, not to shame, but to heal. "I came here today not to be applauded, but to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else. We all carry something inside us, somewhere we come from, something we believe in, a culture that shaped us. When we disrespect someone else's roots, we damage our own." He invited students to stand and share. One by one they did. A girl from Pakistan talked about hiding her name. A Latino boy confessed he was once the one who laughed at cultural kids. Even a teacher tearfully apologized for not stepping. In that day, the final image of the event wasn't Malik on stage. It was a glass frame in the school library. Inside it hung the original torn dashiki, repaired but unwearable. Preserved not for what it lost, but for what it started. Beneath it, engraved on a silver plaque, were these words: "They tried to erase identity, but identity became history." Thank you for listening. May we all carry our culture with pride, stand tall in the face of ignorance, and remember, what they tried to tear down, we rebuild stronger. See you in the next story.